Hey guys, it's Dean. Welcome to the Better Man podcast. Today I am joined by Eric Levitan, who is the founder of Vivo, which is an online live and interactive strength training experience for adults in 50s and plus. So I first heard about this from a member of ours, from a member of the Manful Yoga community who is also using the Vivo program. And when I had a call with Eric and got to realize what they were doing on a deeper level and understanding, wow, this is going to be really helpful for so many people. And also how different it is and how unique what they're doing is. I said, okay, we got to get them, we got to get Eric on the podcast. We got to talk about strength training. So, Eric, thank you for joining me in today's episode.
I appreciate it, Dean. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm someone who's been strength training their entire life. We put a lot of strength training into manful yoga as well. But for people who might not understand the importance of weight training, this is strength training is actually, if not the number one, it is one of the top things that you can do for your overall health and well-being. Having muscle as you age is one of the strongest indicators of of remaining disease free, of being able to live the life that you want to live. So it's not just it's not just aesthetics. It's not just like looking jacked. There are muscle is incredibly healthy. So I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about this.
Sure, and you're absolutely right. The literature is so clear and the science has been around for so long that shows that correlation between muscle mass and strength and quality of life and prevention of disease. And unfortunately, not enough people are aware of this. And there's such a predominant narrative, especially as we age, with cardiovascular health and the importance of walking, which, by the way, are incredibly important. But that's only a part of the picture. And our musculoskeletal system and specifically our strength are such a vital role in our not only our health and our health span, but our quality of life. And so as we age, every single person on the planet ages the same way. We all lose muscle mass as a natural part of aging. There's actually a word that I'd love to introduce your listeners to that many people have never heard before, and that word is called sarcopenia. It
Hmm.
sounds like an island off the coast of Italy. It is not. It is a disease of aging that loosely translates into the progressive loss of muscle mass as we age, leading to a lack of mobility. And it begins in our 30s, unfortunately.
Mm.
And it's a progressive condition. So it accelerates as we get older. You lose about somewhere between 5 to 8% of your muscle mass per decade in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. And it really starts to accelerate in your 60s. And
Mm.
as we naturally lose muscle mass, this is what tends to happen. We lose our balance, right? We become a
Hmm.
fall risk. You lose your ability. Muscle mass really helps in things like sopping up blood sugar and managing glucose. We become more susceptible to type 2 diabetes. We start losing bone density and becoming more susceptible to osteoporosis. It contributes to fat being replacing where you're losing some of that muscle, which leads to cardiovascular disease.
Mm.
All of these things begin to happen from a negative health consequence perspective because we are losing muscle mass as we age. And again, this happens to men, women, regardless of where you live, regardless of what your background is. This happens to all of us.
Mm.
And it turns out that there's something we can do about it. And that something is strength training or resistance training or weight training.
Hmm.
Um, and really, at the end of the day, we are in control of the fact that we can prevent this loss of muscle mass and really protect ourselves not only in terms of our independence and the ability to stand up out of a chair or get up off
Hmm.
of the floor, but we can ward off disease. We can prevent type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease and dementia and the list goes on and on. It's a really profound thing that it's important that we get this message out about the fact that A, we lose muscle mass as we age, and B, there's something we can do about it. And that something is called strength training.
Mm. And so, just to help us understand what strength training is does strength training mean you have to go to the gym and lift, do you have to lift barbells? Do you have to lift heavy weight? Do you have to wear, a t-shirt that has been cut into strips so that your nipples are showing while you exercise in order to strength train?
Oh, such a great question. The answer is no, you don't have to do any of those things. What you
Hmm.
do have to do is challenge your muscles to a particular level to elicit the outcomes that you need to get stronger. And so what's wonderful about the human body is we have the capacity to do that all by ourselves. We don't need to wear tank tops. We don't need to go into a gym. We don't need to lift heavy weight even. But what we do need to do is get to a point of challenge, and this is an important aspect for everyone to be aware of. Is what does that mean? And there's different kinds of strength. It can be complicated. To make this really really simple for everybody, you need to be able to do an exercise that's challenging that you can do roughly 8 to 12 times, where you're struggling towards the end of that set. And that's a really good indication that you're doing an appropriate level of intensity, an appropriate level of challenge that will build strength. And so, something that we'll often see is you'll see an individual who's exercising who's just crushing, bicep curls. Maybe they're doing 101-pound weight. Now, that's better than not doing anything, but it's not really moving the needle in the way that it should. And so, a part of the
Hmm.
education kind of awareness around what does it mean to do strength training is what are the kinds of exercises that are really important? How do you do them so that you can engage in them safely? And then how do you do it so you can get that level of challenge such that you see the progress? You see yourself getting stronger and you protect your body from all of the ailments associated with aging.
And so and by the way, I had some feedback that sometimes I look like I'm doing something else while I'm listening to listening to responses. And I am. I'm taking notes as I go so that I can ask better questions later. So if you're looking at me wondering like, why is Dean like, that's because I'm actually am like taking notes and planning out more questions as we go. So one, so the question that comes up then, strength training is awesome. It's great for you. What is the resistance to resistance training? Like why are people not doing it as much?
So there are a lot of objections, and some of them are fair, and some of them are societal and kind of these preconceived notions that we've been drilling into people's heads for decades. That as we get older and we get more frail, we have to really be careful not to injure or hurt ourselves,
Mm.
or worse. And so there's a societal influence that I'll talk about in just a second, but the other is more of a personal objection, and a lot of that part of what we did is we're dealing with older adults. We're dealing with individuals who we know have not necessarily incorporated into their lives and have reached a point where it's hard to take that first step. And what we found is the predominantly underlying objection and barrier to engaging in really any fitness program as you age is this core concept of shame.
Mm.
And it's often manifests itself as fear, embarrassment, worried that you're going to get injured or worried that you're going to
Mhm.
look foolish doing an exercise that you've never done before. But it
Mhm.
really comes down to this common principle of shame, and that's a hard thing for everyone to get over. That's a hard thing that we really need to educate people on and create this kind of accessible platform, because knowing that that first step is there. I mean, look, if you've never done a program like this before, even if you're younger and you're fit, you're always a little nervous that first time you engage in a program. And
Mhm.
so, what we really try to do is make this a judgment free zone, right? Everybody comes and participates at their own level,
Mhm.
because the reality of the situation is you're not going to get hurt. If you do it by yourself and if you're doing it without kind of the oversight of a trainer, you're
Mhm.
more likely to either get injured or put yourself in a situation that you shouldn't be in. But
Mhm.
part of what we do from Vivo, and part of what I would recommend, whether someone does Vivo or not, is you engage with someone who's watching you. You engage with a certified personal trainer. You
Mhm.
engage with a program to get started that is giving you the guidance and the kind of safety net to allow you to figure stuff out so that you can then become empowered to do this on your own. And
Mhm.
so we try really hard that, that big objection of I'm going to get injured is we'll make sure you don't get injured, right? We can work
Mhm.
with individuals, we can correct form, we can cue you, we can either progress or regress an exercise according to your specific fitness level. And those are really important things that help put people's mind at ease. But there is this concept that look, I used to do all these things and now I can't. And that's shameful, right? That's embarrassing. And it's not
Hmm.
even just embarrassing to other people. It's the sense of shame that you feel about yourself is, boy, I'm less than because I can't do this anymore. And I think for men in particular, so much of our value system is that we're supposed to be strong, right? We're
Hmm.
supposed to be physically strong, mentally strong,
Right.
emotionally strong. And as we age and we lose some of that strength, that becomes a source of shame for a lot of men.
Yeah.
Societally, I think it's also important to recognize that we treat older adults with kid gloves, and we need to understand that older adults need to be challenged and pushed just like younger individuals do, and that, again, done in a safe manner, it's a really, really effective tool. We've been running Vivo classes for 3 years now. We
Hmm.
launched in April of 2020 with the start of the pandemic. We've probably run 15,000 over 15,000 classes.
Hmm.
I'm going to knock on wood here, Dean. Do you know how many injuries we've seen in 15,000 classes of doing Vivo programming?
Probably zero.
0. Will people be sore afterwards? Absolutely, and
Hmm.
that's a part of this, and we can talk about that in a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
but are injuries or worse happening? Absolutely not, and I think that's a really important thing for all of us to really walk away with is you can do this, and you can do this in a safe and engaging and challenging way and begin to really see differences in your
Hmm.
strength and your confidence and your capabilities and your function without worrying about some significant health event that's going to happen because you engaged in fitness.
Hmm.
Now, there is the caveat I need to throw out. Obviously, if you're coming from a very unhealthy place or you're dealing with a chronic condition, you should always consult with a physician before you start any fitness program. Absolutely.
Hmm.
That being said, exercise is one of the things that we are engineered to do as human beings, and it's something that people should not be fearful of.
Yeah, like a couple things that I was thinking about as you were giving your answer. I think about what we used to do before we lived such sedentary lives. People who we used to be active, way more active. And I think we do kind of baby people as they get older, and they say, oh, and that is reinforced by conversations that I have. I have conversations with people, and they say like, oh, you know what, I'm in my 50s, I shouldn't be lifting weights, or like I'm in my 60s, I shouldn't be lifting weights. I'm like, oh, I mean, you can there's so many different ways to lift weights. You don't have to have like your body weight or like more than your body weight. You can use you can use 3 pounds, you can use 2 pounds. You can there's so many different ways to strength train. And what you're talking about with the way that Vivo runs their classes, I just wanted to say that there are so many resources to learning proper technique. Like a personal trainer is, in the long run, it's so much less expensive than you think it is to just go hire somebody to teach you how to do these exercises. Like walk in, say like, I want to buy a 5 pack. I want someone to teach me how to do these basic exercises. I want to learn how to do what's like a safe version of a bench press that I can do? What is like a safe version of a squat that I can do? What is like an easy version of a deadlift? Like there are such basic exercises,
Yep.
and if you just have, someone who's going to teach you proper technique and make that tiny investment in yourself so that you know how to do that over time, it's so worth it. But I wanted to ask you about, specifically about Vivo, because I think a big resistance that people do have to this is they want to make sure that they're doing something properly, and not everybody wants to go into the gym. And being able to work out from home with someone who's like giving you instruction and feedback in real time, that's really cool. That's why when I heard about this, I was like, oh my God, you guys are just going to be so popular once this takes off. So I wonder if you could tell me about kind of the instruction style of Vivo and how you make sure people get a good workout, how they avoid injury. Like, what are things that, people should be looking for in instruction?
Absolutely. And one final thought on the prior kind of question that you were asking, because I think not only are we addressing this concept of shame and the societal kind of avoidance of worry of injury, there is another component of that that feeds into all of this that I'll give in my next answer, which is there is an awareness, a lack of education and awareness that is also present. And the real genesis of why I started Vivo and why we do Vivo as this live and interactive small group that I'll talk about is, um, there's this really big push that we think walking is enough. Walking is enough to keep us healthy through our old age. And what I personally experienced with my aging parents is, they started having falls. They started seeing a really precipitous decline in their quality of life as they aged,
Mhm.
which I found out to be very typical of mid to late 70s, that age range, where they've lost a significant amount of muscle mass and they've started having fall issues.
Mhm.
And their doctors told them to walk more, and they were already walking 2 to 3 miles a day.
Mm.
And I knew there was something else. And so I think even in the healthcare ecosystem, as patients are talking to physicians, there's just a lack of emphasis on maintaining strength as we age, and
Mhm.
knowing that there's all the other pressures that we talked about, and there's an inherent fear and sense of shame. How we approach this is, a, we want to make this accessible to anyone, regardless of where you are, whether you're rural, whether you have access to a brick and mortar facility or not. We think everybody needs the proper guidance and education to make sure that they're safe and can be effective. And then the second thing is, it's got to be a small enough group, because we're dealing with a population that
Mhm.
needs that feedback. The mobility profile for any one individual over the age of really probably 40 begins to get ever increasingly complex. So
Mhm.
someone may have arthritis in their shoulder and not have a lot of range of motion above their shoulder. Someone
Mhm.
else may have an artificial knee. Someone else may have osteoporosis in their hip. Right? We begin to, and often it's multiple of these things. It's multiple comorbidities that
Yeah.
someone's dealing with, and so what we find is kind of that foundational element is the ability to individualize for everybody. And
Mhm.
so that immediately means it's got to be a small number of people, because we
Yeah.
need to be able to correct form. We need to be able to modify an exercise if it's causing you pain or discomfort, or if you have a chronic condition. We need to make sure that you're being challenged, because often what we also see is some people are very strong in some areas and really not very strong in others. Right.
Mhm.
So you're not like in an advanced class because maybe you've got a really strong upper body, but you have some neuropathy in your feet, and you don't have
Mhm.
good balance and you can't do squats, right? So there's often a blend of function and mobility in any one individual. So kind of the first foundational thing that we really try to address is being able to individualize this experience for someone, which automatically means we're one-on-one or one on a small number of people.
Mhm.
The other element that we really leaned into when we were building this program is understanding behavioral change. Because here's what's not a mystery. We all know exercise is good for you, right? There's
Mhm.
nothing new and innovative about that approach. But how do you get people to engage consistently and to a level of challenge that's going to yield real health outcomes?
Mhm.
And so as we started looking into behavioral science, what we found is, not for everyone, but for most of us, feeling a level of accountability to a community is what drives accountability
Mhm.
and ultimately behavioral change. And so where we landed was small groups of 8 people or less, where it was small enough that you could provide that individualized attention, but big enough that we were making this a socially rich environment, and we
Mhm.
were building this sense of community that would drive adoption, that would drive behavioral change and people coming back. And again, we've been running this program now for 3 years. And I think what I'm probably most proud of for what we are doing is we run 75 classes a week currently, so we're doing quite a bit of
Mhm.
volume. Our average monthly customer retention is 98%. That
Wow.
sounds like a fake number. It is not. What we have built is extremely sticky, and it is all on that core fundamental thesis around community and behavioral
Mhm.
change, accountability. And it's the small group that is kind of the magic sauce that makes this thing work. So, what we do in a Vivo class is we've got 5 components. We always start with some mobility and some dynamic movement, get the blood flowing, get people loose. We always do balance work. Balance actually starts to go pretty early, also as we're losing muscle mass.
Mhm.
So even in your 40s and 50s, it's important to always keep balance top of mind.
Mhm.
Then we engage in something called dual task exercises, and I'll maybe hold this for another question.
Yeah,
Um,
this was really cool when you explained it to me. So it makes total sense. So yeah, go on.
I'll come back to it, but it's basically a way of engaging not only the body, but the body and the mind at the same time. And there's a lot of
Mhm,
science behind. It's really good for preventing dementia and other neurocognitive disorders, Parkinson's, et cetera. And then we get into the meat of kind of a circuit of what we do, and that's really where we focus on strength. We change the theme of what that looks like every single week. So some weeks are more high intensity interval training. Other weeks are more focused on power, where you're moving weight quickly. Other weeks are
mhm,
focused on maybe a paused rep where you spend more time under tension. We're constantly evolving every single week. The theme of what we do changes to create that variation and that challenge.
mhm,
And then the fifth component is a cool down, some mindfulness, some stretching, some more static stretching
mhm,
to get people to come down after this workout. And the classes are 45 minutes long. And because of the fact that it's a small group and we're constantly kind of moving the programming throughout, it goes by really quickly. And
mhm,
so that's really what the Vivo class looks like. It's a small group online. We do it over Zoom. It's a live and interactive experience where we're keeping people safe. We're queuing. We're
mhm.
watching their form. We're correcting it. We're answering questions. It's a very interactive experience.
Guys, I hope you're enjoying this solo podcast. Really quick here, I want to give a shout out to our featured brand this week. This is Bird Dog. I have had a pair of these shorts for 10 years now, and I am still wearing them. They are the most comfortable built in liner that I have ever worn. I can wear these things for anything that I do, whether I am playing lacrosse, doing yoga, lifting weights, going for a walk. I've worn these out when I was younger and going out all day. They can stand up to the hot Texas summer, no problem, and I'll still feel comfortable even after wearing them for hours and hours and hours. So I'm really excited that we've partnered with Bird Dog. They're going to give you a free tumbler if you purchase a pair of their shorts using the link in our show notes on their website, birddogs.com. So click that link in the show notes when this episode is done. Get yourself a pair of Bird Dogs. I guarantee you're going to be happy with them. All right, guys, let's get back to the episode. Yeah. And that to me seems like that would be the most when you're working out with somebody, right? When there's like a live, when there's a live component, um when there's other people just making it makes it more exciting. Like it's like yes, the motivation is there, it's nice to be with people, it's nice to get feedback, but also it's much more exciting when you're doing it with somebody. So, if you're struggling with doing something on your own, like it does help to find a group to do it with. And I'm saying this as somebody whose only training service is like watch a video and follow along to it. But if you are struggling with, and there's a lot of other things that you can do to help with increasing consistency. That's literally most of what I do is coming up with strategies to help with that. It's not with coming up with workouts, it's like coming up with strategies to be more consistent with the
That's
workouts.
right. That's right.
um but
And
like the but yeah
I'll add
but
to that, Dean. I think what's wonderful about video and on demand content that you're creating today is it's the ultimate in flexibility, right? So someone can engage wherever they are, whenever they want. They don't need to adhere to a schedule, and it provides this wonderful opportunity that if it's 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon or 11 at night, they can engage in a really engaging workout that you're creating today. For some people, they don't have that motivation.
mhm,
And a really effective tool, and even this is something that if you're just even doing a standard video program, my recommendation based on what we've seen in behavioral sciences, schedule it as an appointment in your calendar.
mhm,
Something amazing happens when we have an appointment in our calendar.
yeah,
We tend to go. And so if you had a doctor's appointment scheduled for Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., you'd be there, right? You wouldn't miss it. You have an appointment. And exercise should really be looked at in the same way, whether you're doing it as by yourself or you're doing it as a part of a broader program. That's a wonderful motivator because often what happens is you'll wake up on a Tuesday morning. Maybe you're supposed to exercise that day. It's very easy to talk yourself out of.
mhm,
And sometimes you need that little bit of a nudge because here's what doesn't happen is when you're done with a workout, you always feel better, right? The
right,
brain releases endorphins. That's its way of rewarding our reward center. for doing something that it knows was good for us. So 100% of the time, those times I want to work out and I end up going, I feel great afterwards. Like, oh my gosh, that was, even if it's not the best workout I've ever had, you feel great.
Right.
But it's so easy to not do that. That scheduling an appointment, I think, is a really effective tool that works for both of these platforms, these kind of different
Hmm.
types of platforms. So I wanted to add
Yeah.
that you know Manful Yoga is this wonderful resource that gives the ultimate flexibility. Sometimes scheduling it is a really great technique.
Yeah, we actually do have features built into our website as well as our members area that allows people to schedule the workouts in advance. So the website you can use it to add to your smart calendar, which is pretty cool. And then in the app, there's actually a calendar in the app that you can use. The only thing it doesn't have is a mass add all to calendar. So you can't add an entire program to your calendar. You have to do it workout by workout. But hopefully that doesn't make it too difficult. So another question that I had that I wanted to ask you: a lot of people think that they're doing resistance training wrong for certain reasons, and people say, "I got sore," you know, "I'm sore. Am I doing something wrong?" And my obvious answer here is no. Soreness is part of it. Soreness is actually part of the process of how you build strength. Um, but I wanted to ask you about some of the other things that people experience from resistance training or from weight training that might make them think they're doing it wrong when actually they're not.
Yeah, soreness is one of those funny things that
Hmm.
it's almost a a blessing in disguise, right? Like it doesn't feel great to be sore, but it's also the body's way of letting you know that you probably did something correctly.
Yeah.
As long as it's not an acute pain, right? That's and
Hmm.
that's helping. Part of
Yeah.
what we
What's
do.
the what do you, how would you explain the difference between soreness and, oh, I overdid it, something's wrong?
Yeah, so we try to describe it in terms of being a sharp pain. So
Hmm.
if you have a an acute injury somewhere, if you have a knee issue, if you have a shoulder issue, and you're feeling something like a sharp pain when you move in a specific way,
Hmm.
then that's a bad thing. So we tend to, or we try to educate people on the difference between what is healthy muscle soreness, which means that you're doing a good job,
Hmm.
versus an injury or inflammation that you need to be aware of. And generally it's that sharp pain that I think is a good way for people to identify if something has a really big burst of pain at one particular moment of movement. That's not good. You want to stop at that point. We try very hard at the beginning of every single class. We do a quick check-in. Has anything changed with people? How are you feeling today? And if something hurts, stop. And if you have a question, ask us.
Hmm.
And those are really important things, even as you're doing this by yourself. Be in tune with your body. There's a great expression that I heard once that if you listen when your body whispers, it doesn't have to scream. And I think about that all the time. And I share that with people because every significant injury I've
Mm.
ever experienced in my life, I've had little warning signs before
Right.
that injury happened. And I
Exactly.
ignored those warning signs, and it never fails. I ruptured my Achilles tendon, and 10 minutes before I did that, I felt a little twinge. Right,
Hmm.
my body whispered, and then I didn't listen, and then my body screamed. And
Hmm.
I think those are important things that we help people understand is listen to your body. The other thing that we really try to do is there are really three that I call the holy trinity of exercise, three exercises, and I'd probably add a fourth with deadlifts. But push-ups, planks, and squats are really the most fundamental movement patterns that really engage the entire body. And again, I'd probably add deadlifts as a fourth. But
Hmm.
what we try when someone starts Vivo is we try to nail the form of those, because getting form correct matters, as you said. And that allows you to get a much more effective workout when your form is good. If you're doing a squat and you're leaning forward, not only are you going to put yourself at risk, but you're going to be probably not using the muscles that you really want to be working.
Hmm.
And so we really try to create some education and a comfort level around those three exercises in particular. because again, that is, if you did nothing else other than push-ups, planks, and squats for the rest of your life, you would maintain your mobility. Those are really good things to do. And educating people on how to do those well is an important part of what we do in all of our classes. And then we want to expand that, right? We want to, there's another term that we talk about in the fitness world called periodization, which
Mhm.
is the constant variation of how we exercise and what we target and what we do, because that also helps with making progress and getting stronger. And so
Mhm.
it's very important that we don't just do the same three exercises every day. We create some variation with that. We create some
Mhm.
challenge. Um, Human beings respond well to challenge, physically, mentally, emotionally. Um, if we get really comfortable, we stop making progress. And so that's a really core kind of thesis for us at Vivo is we want to continue to bring this challenge into the program. And that's really, we haven't talked about this much, but part of the other thing that we do with Vivo is we do assessments for everybody. So we
Mhm.
do, when you join the program, we do a baseline assessment. We baseline your strength and balance, and then we reassess every 2 months. And there's a variety of reasons that we do that, not the least of which is when you begin to see that plateau, which inevitably you will,
Mhm.
that's a wonderful opportunity to make sure that we all understand what's required to get to continue to make that next level of progress.
Mhm. Yeah, and so another thing that I wanted to add into you're talking about is when you're going through the exercises, you shouldn't be just doing them and getting through them. The goal shouldn't be just like, okay, I'm going to do 10 of these and I'm just going to push through it and I'm going to finish and then I'm done. You should actually be like, it should feel somewhat good in a way. You should feel like, oh, this is a nice challenge. I can feel the right muscles working. Like I'm celebrating my body's strength, my body's capabilities. I'm getting to a point where I have to challenge myself, but it's not ever hurting, and it's not hurting, right? Like I think something that is so common with people in this age bracket, guys 50s, 60s, 70s, is the no pain, no gain mentality, right? There was probably, I think, in every high school weight room in the 80s or 90s, there's probably like a no pain, no, and before then was probably like, even 60s, 70s, I guess. There was the, no pain, no gain mentality. It was all over gyms. And for somebody who doesn't understand that the no pain, no gain mentality more so refers to working through the discomfort of a challenge rather than like pushing through like physical sharp pain, because that's just going to leave you injured.
Yep.
um, and I think that's something that people need to understand. And the other part of that is if you're doing an exercise, like if you're doing a squat, like we talked about squats, for example, we talked about squats, we talked about push-ups. If you're doing those exercises and they hurt, there's probably there's a reason for that. You shouldn't just keep doing it and expecting the pain to go away. And that's where it helps to learn the appropriate exercises to help how you can make those exercises feel better. Like, so if your squats hurts, like a lot of people say, I don't do squats because my knees hurt. I kind of look at that. I'm like, well, no, that's yes, your knees hurt when you squat, but it's not because you have bad knees. It's because you have weak hips.
Right.
You have a lack of mobility in your ankles. Your core
That's
is
right.
weak. So learning learning why those exercises hurt, and trying to do those exercises that um, help to make those exercises not hurt, um, instead of just like doing them repeatedly and expecting the pain to go away.
That's
And
right.
and I kind of got away from like what you were talking about. I will completely admit that, but I think that's something that's really important to mention because we were talking about pain versus soreness, and ultimately strength training should feel good. Like it should help you feel, you should feel capable with your body. It should be help you feel proud of yourself. It shouldn't be like, oh, I just got to finish this. I just got to get through 3 more reps and then I'm done. Because then you're going to be hurt. You're going to be in pain for the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, and there's actually 2 things I'll add to that, Dean. One is often pain in a joint is a reflection of something above or below in the chain of that body, right? So
Hmm.
when you're experiencing knee pain, it's typically a muscular imbalance that's above or below the knee, and also, creating awareness and education around that, because
Hmm.
you're right. When someone goes to do a squat or a chair stand, depending on what they can do, and their knees hurt, their inclination is I'm going to stop doing this, which at least for the moment is a good idea. But in
Or
general,
I'm going to go get knee surgery.
right, or I'm going to get knee surgery, right? Yes, and get an
Yeah.
injection, or a variety of different, much more significant things to do, and where the reality is, well, let's regress you on that specific exercise, which is something I want to talk about,
Hmm.
and let's figure out where that imbalance is, and where that focus can be so that your knee doesn't hurt. So the second part of this that I really wanted to introduce is we've built out this, and this is not unique to fitness, right? This exists probably with every program, but we've built out this sort of regimented 4 level system for every exercise that we do. And a push-up is probably the best example that I can give in terms of how we teach push-ups. So one of my favorite things to do when I will frequently talk about and speak to a group about the importance of strength training as you age. And I'll ask, especially if the audience is a little bit older, maybe more in their 70s and beyond, is raise your hand if you can do a push up. And you'll see a smattering of hands go up, maybe a quarter of the room, a fifth of the room, not very many hands. And the answer is actually everybody in this room can do a push up. You're just doing a different variation of the push up that you have in your mind. And so
Hmm.
when you say the term push up to somebody, they have a mental picture of getting down on the floor on your hands and your toes and doing a traditional push up.
Hmm.
But there's actually a way to progress and regress that, make it harder or make it easier. So for people who can't get to the ground, which is a healthy dose of older adults are not comfortable getting to the ground and getting back off, there's a way to introduce a push up against the back of a chair or a countertop where you don't have to go to the ground. The further back you move your feet, the more the angle and torque that you put your body on, and you can do a push up that way. And even if you can't do that, you can actually stand against the wall, take a step back, and do a push up against a wall. Almost everybody can do that, right? You can stand perfectly upright and push yourself off of a wall. That's a variation of a push up. And then on the other side, traditional push up, obviously, maybe you can get down on the floor, but you don't have the strength yet to do that. You can do a push up from your knees, and it removes a lot of that weight, and you can still work your pec, your chest muscles, and your shoulders
Hmm.
and your tries. And then you can also elevate your toes, right? And make a push up harder. And so, what we try to do is a level system where a level 1 push up against the wall, level 2 push up is off the back of a chair or a counter, a level 3 push up is off of your knees, and a level 4 push up is what we think of as a traditional push up. So, we will demo or talk about all of these when it's time to do a push up in a Vivo class. And so, what we're trying to do is meet everybody where they are. So, you might not be able to get to the floor and do a push up, but we don't want that, and we don't want you to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation where you will get injured. Is start with a lower level version of that exercise and get comfortable with it. And once you do that, you move up to the next level of that exercise. And so we do that with everything. A squat is another good example. A lot of people, because of knee concerns or knee pain or hip mobility issues, they're not comfortable doing squats. So how do we regress a squat? Well, we can do a chair stand, right? You can
Hmm.
literally stand up from a chair and sit back down in a chair, which a lot of people can do. Some people may have difficulty with that. So you can put a pillow on a chair and elevate what that chair
Hmm.
and minimize your range of motion. There's ways to continue to make something more approachable for someone to do safely to ultimately get to what you're talking about, Dean, which is it shouldn't hurt, right?
Hmm.
It should be something that you can do comfortably, but again, you're looking for that 8 to 12 rep range where it begins to get really challenging in that level. That's where you're in a good range.
Hmm. So, what are some realities that people who are older, guys, 50s, 60s, 70s, what are some realities that guys need to be aware of when it comes to safely doing resistance training? Like what are some differences that they need to be aware of training now versus when they were, doing high school sports?
So there's probably 3 things that I would highlight, and 2 of them are physical, and 1 is really around nutrition. First and foremost is Balance is a complicated thing.
Mm,
And we often don't associate balance problems and falls until we get, and I'm going to make some generic statements around age. These are absolutely not hard, fast rules, steadfast rules. Everybody ages differently. We've got incredibly fit 90-year-old customers that we deal with now, and less fit 50-year-old customers, right? So it's more about the stage you're in rather than the age. That being said, to generically talk, often we begin to see balance issues in the mid 60s and creeping into 70s where it becomes more of an issue.
mhm,
And understanding that and making sure that as you're engaging in exercise, you're being safe. Because if you do fall and if you do have an injury, that is a significant negative consequence that it will be that much harder to continue to progress out of. And so, first and foremost, we always try to make sure that people are exercising in a safe way, really focused on their balance. Maybe you need to have a chair nearby or a wall nearby. If you're doing something like on one leg, you want to make sure that you've got a sturdy support system. You want to look at the room around you and make sure there's no carpet lips or edges or things on the floor, balls, pets, others that can
mhm.
create a hazard for this
Pets.
exercise program. Pets are a big one. Pets
Yeah.
are a big one. We don't often see them come in the room, right? They can get in our way and really cause some issues.
Mhm.
But the other aspect of balance is you have to actively train at it. And
Yeah.
so there's all kinds of ways that you can train on balance, not the least of which is one-legged exercises that
Mhm,
really focus on proprioception and the strength of that, again, that whole kind of kinetic chain from your core all the way down through your lower extremities. So balance is really the first one, is just to be aware of, make sure you're engaging safely. The
mhm,
second is start slowly. I see this all the time, especially with former athletes, people who used to be fit, they've gotten away from it, and then they start back up with a program like Vivo. And there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of enthusiasm.
yeah,
And knowing that you actually have to progress, you don't want this J curve of effort. You want to do something that's pretty slow and steady.
mhm,
Get comfortable with the form, get comfortable with the exercises, start adding moving up those levels of progression, right? In a more
mhm,
slower, steadier way to make sure that you don't injure yourself. And then the third, and this is really an important part of this, is focused on nutrition and specifically protein.
mhm,
Our body's ability to convert protein into muscle, which is, by the way, the building block of muscle is protein and specifically the essential amino acids.
mhm,
As we age, we become less efficient at converting protein into muscle, which means that we need to eat more protein. Again, eat
mhm,
more protein. And as we're doing something like a strength training or resistance training program, you need to make sure that there's the building blocks of that muscle are present in your system, which is that protein. And again, not as well known as it should be, but we need to eat more protein as we get older. This becomes really, really important. So if you're strength training and really engaged in exercise and you're not eating enough protein, you will not see the results that you're ultimately looking for. And
mhm.
so this is kind of two sides of the same coin. Not only do you need to be exercising effectively, you need to make sure that you're consuming enough protein to create that muscle.
Yeah,
And that's an important part that we also try to preach.
yeah. So I'm gonna go through those 3 things just really quick and add in a little bit. So first off, balance. I always say balance is part skill and part strength. And so, to work on your balance, that means that you also need to train your glutes, you need to train your core, you need to train your ankles, and you also
Your
have
feet.
to.
Yep.
Yeah, your feet. Yeah, you have to have, it's not just a skill, it's also like you need to have that actual strength to be able to do it. Otherwise, you'll try doing it and you'll just fall over. The second thing you said easing into it. Something that is really different about your fitness, your strength as you age. It's not, the question becomes not whether or not you can do it. It becomes, yeah, but how are you going to feel tomorrow? Because a lot of us we can keep pushing and keep going, but like, how are you going to feel tomorrow? Because those injuries, they don't often pop up like as you're doing them. Most injuries are going to happen after. You're gonna realize, like, the day after. Oh, I pushed it, I know what happened, I know when I pushed it, it didn't hurt then, but it hurts now, and now I'm out for like a week or 2 weeks, or like I've got to go get my hamstring looked at because I think I tore my hamstring.
Great
So
point.
not how much, yeah, not just when you're doing it, but how you feel afterwards. And so easing into it is a great way of realizing, okay, this is how much I'm pushing. Now let me see how I feel tomorrow. And your body will adjust to that soreness eventually, but like easing into it, I think that's a great point. And then with the nutrition, I think that most most wellness and fitness that I'm seeing, people are doing a much better job of putting out the message, hey, we do need protein. It doesn't matter if you get that from plant protein or if you get that from other sources of protein, but I think the number is like zero point 0.7 grams to 1 gram of protein per pound, or per pound of lean muscle. I can't remember which one. Do you?
It's per pound, or it's actually per kilogram, I think, which
Per
is a little
kilogram.
confusing because it's not
Okay.
per pound. A good rule of thumb that we generally tell people, and obviously it does, it 100% depends on your size.
Hmm.
Um, but if you strive to get 30 grams of protein at every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that is a really, really good kind of benchmark to shoot for. And
Hmm.
specifically, just knowing how the American diet and what that looks like, we generally have very little protein at breakfast and
So many
some protein
carbs.
at lunch
So many
and so
carbs.
many carbs, and
Oh
then a
god.
whole bunch of protein for dinner. And that same, you may consume 100 grams of protein in that profile, but the
Mhm.
body doesn't work that way. The body needs a certain threshold of protein for that protein synthesis to create that muscle. And
Mhm.
so that really happens at that 30-gram mark. So spacing that out, evening that out, 30 grams at breakfast, eggs, Greek yogurt, protein powder, whey powder in a smoothie. These are all really good things to incorporate into your breakfast. And then obviously lunch and dinner, it's a little bit easier, I think, traditionally to find protein sources. These are really important things. Also, not all protein is the same. We're really looking for those amino acids, those essential amino
Mhm.
acids. Leucine being a really important one for building muscle and strength. And so it gets a little bit more advanced
Mhm.
as you kind of get into this space, but just generally 30 grams of protein at every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner is hopefully a good guideline for the listeners.
And what's timing matters, right? I mean, is it so everyone hears like you got to eat within 30 minutes of your workout, but like what's the, you know, what does the science say?
Yeah, the conventional wisdom for a long time was you have to eat your protein within 30 minutes of working out. I think this is constantly evolving. The latest literature that I've seen is it doesn't matter.
Mm.
And I think that's the latest science. But there's literally new studies coming out about this every day.
Mhm.
I think probably the net of it is nobody really knows for sure. Nutrition is one of those kind of ever evolving sciences that the more we research, the more we study. There's also a lot of a healthy dose of individualism, right? So
Mhm.
the way that your body responds to something is not necessarily the way that everybody's body will respond to that.
Mm.
We know enough about the microbiome and gut health to know that there's a lot of individual nuance with nutrition. That said, the latest science says it you don't have to eat it within that first 30 minutes. I certainly know a ton of people that still do that.
Mhm.
Uh,
I mean, yeah, for me, it's like it was drilled into me. Like I'm like, I gotta go home. I gotta get my protein shake right now. Like, don't talk to me. I have to rush home. Or you see people like shaking up protein shakes at the end of their workout. Um, but yeah, and that's I'm glad you answered that question. Um, I have a couple other questions. What are some things that make it difficult to realize the we talked about this a little bit, but with nutrition, but what are some other things that make it difficult for people to fully receive the benefits of strength training? What are some things that get in the way of, so even if they are like working out, what are some things that would make it less effective?
so the two big ones, there's two big rocks out here, and it is consistency and level of challenge, and that is
Mm,
along with protein, obviously, which we talked about. That is it. Those are the fundamental items. So consistency is the foundation. If you are not exercising consistently, and when I mean consistently from a strength training perspective, that's 2 to 3 times a week,
mhm,
you will not see the benefits. And that's probably, the CDC has recommendations on exercise overall, 150 of moderate to vigorous, minutes of aerobic exercise. That's equally as important from a consistency perspective, is to really see the benefits. It's got to be done it's got to be a part of your life. It's got to be a
mhm,
part of what you do on a weekly basis. it's not to say you can't miss a workout or you can't miss a class, um, but it is to say you got to do it consistently, right? So once a month, twice 1 week or 3 times 1 week, and then you take 2 weeks off and you do it three more times, you're just not going to see those benefits.
Mhm.
What you want to do is create a routine for yourself that gets you working out from a strength perspective 2 to 3 times a week. Once a week is fine. Once a week is more about maintenance. So if you are, and look, one of the other really common objections we didn't talk about earlier was I don't have time. That's
Right.
probably
Yeah.
the objection I hear the most. And that is the biggest fallacy of all, right? Like, we all have time for things that are priorities to us, and that's
Yeah.
just the psychology of it. If you're going to the doctor or you have a chronic disease that you're managing, you're going to make time for that, and
Yeah.
so you can make time for exercise. And to tell yourself otherwise is not accurate.
Yeah.
But assuming that you can get that out of the way of your psyche, then 2 to 3 times a week is really what you want to focus on. That's the biggest, most fundamental thing. That's where
Mhm.
most people fall down, is creating that behavioral change so they're doing this 2 to 3 times a week. The second is that level of challenge. And this is hard because there's more nuance here. Because what we almost always see, look, we do these assessments, we capture data on everyone that's participating in this program. So we have a lot of data that we've looked at. And in the first 2 months, we see a very predictable curve, right? You start here and you make a ton of progress in those first 2 months. What
Mhm.
we see with our customers is an average of about a 25% increase in strength in 2 months. That's a pretty big jump.
Mhm.
Um, 25% stronger than you were in 2 months is an impressive thing. Between 2 months and 4 months, that begins to dip a little bit. You still make progress, but you went from baseline to 25%, and then maybe you add another 10% from 25% to 35%
Mhm.
stronger than you were at baseline. But it's slowed, right? It's not another 25% stronger. It's maybe 10% on top of that. And if you were just to follow out that curve, it eventually begins to flatten.
Mm.
And there's this concept about what's called progressive overload, where you want to continue to challenge the body. That is
Yeah.
what creates
This
strength.
this is one of my questions. I wrote this down. I'll tie this into my question with the specific audience in a minute, but go on.
So what we want to do is identify those points, right? Because at that's an indication to us that that level of challenge is beginning to wane. And by the way, it's not because of a lack of effort. Often you're getting stronger, and therefore you are doing those exercises more effectively with
Mhm.
greater ease, and you need to change it. And
Yeah.
I had this wonderful anecdote that I love to share with people. One of our customers we send everybody resistance bands. That's a big part of our program. So we use a
Mhm.
combination of body weight or resistance bands, and it's the tubes with handles, not the cheapy bands that you get in physical therapy, but a more substantial thing.
Mhm.
Resistance bands are wonderful because they're incredibly flexible in terms of the kinds of exercises you can do with them, but they also create a good level of challenge,
Yeah.
and you can cinch up on it, right, and hold it closer together and create more
Mhm.
tension. You can step away further from an anchor point and create more tension. You can double up resistance bands to create more challenge. It's a really, and it's also gentle on the body,
Mhm.
right? So it's gentler on those joints than a machine or dumbbells or a big heavy barbell. So we had an older gentleman who was a customer. He was 80 years old, and after the first 6 weeks of the program, he reached out to us and said, "Can you please send me new bands?" And we don't get a lot of requests for new bands. We buy really high quality, we ship really high quality bands.
Mhm.
And we were like, "Oh no, did your bands break? What's going on?" He goes, "No, no, no, they've lost their tension." And again, it was one of those head touching moments. Is like, lost their tension, and literally our head trainer was like, "Do you think it's maybe because you're getting stronger?"
Uh,
And watch the interaction with this customer was hilarious because he had this light bulb moment, this epiphany that the bands weren't broken. He
mhm.
was just getting stronger. And so but at some point that stops, right? And so we start to see the waning of that progression, and we know we
Yeah.
need to intervene. You need to move up a level in exercise. You need to do, increase the weight or increase the tension of that band or stand farther away from the anchor point, or maybe you
Mhm.
do need to get dumbbells and get heavier dumbbells.
Yeah.
But there are ways that we want to continue to progress, and that's an important element of any fitness program. So consistency and level of challenge, those are the two really determining factors in terms of getting outcomes out of as a result of exercise.
Hmm. Yeah. So progressive overload is kind of like that is the I don't know how to say it. It is one of the it's just kind of like the essential concept behind effective strength training is you slowly increase the weight or the reps as you progress. I mean, as the weeks go on. So like one week you're doing, let's say you're doing 100 pounds one week, and then the next week you're doing 105 pounds. Um, Something important to realize is that as you described in, looking at 0 to 2 months versus 2 to 3 months, is that progression is not linear. So you're not going to add 50% every month or like 20% every month. Your body adapts to things, and it becomes what's actually happening is your body is getting better at doing more with less. So like you're not getting more muscle because your body is figuring out how to have that strength by making with less energy or with less muscle. So that's where you need to start doing things to change it up to keep your body guessing. So something that I am thinking about because I'm thinking of selfishly, I'm thinking of myself like, hey, what's going to happen to me when I get into my 50s? Is does how does the concept of progressive overload work for people as they get in their 50s, 60s, 70s, when you're not going to be able to expect, oh, in my 50s, I was repping squats at, and I'm just going to give a round number here, at 100 pounds. Like I was doing 100 pounds in my 50s, and now I'm in my 60s and I'm doing 90 pounds or like whatever that is. So like how do you think about progressive overload as you age versus when
Yeah,
you're like in your 20s and 30s?
and so the from a philosophical and principle-based perspective, nothing changes. It's exactly the same, and I think part of where you get into this conversation of what we talked about earlier with shame is you have to throw away those numbers, and not care as much that you were doing 100 pounds in your 20s and now you're doing 90 pounds.
Hmm.
Because what you really wanna do is create a level of challenge for yourself where you are that day, because even from day to day, week to week, month to month, this is changing. And the older we get, the more variation we see on how we feel on a daily basis. Sleep is a huge impact and factor on that. So is stress, and mental health and social isolation. And there's a number, and whether you're sick or not, there's a number of factors. And part of this is you need to throw away some of those benchmarks that I think we traditionally think about. I remember as a 20-year-old, I'm in my 50s now. As a 20-year-old or as a teenager, it was all about what your max bench press was, right? As a
Yeah.
guy, it was what can you bench? What's your max?
Yeah.
Um, if to try to recreate that now is just not a good idea,
Mhm.
right? It's what can you do during that day that gets you into that level of, again, that very basic kind of rule of thumb of 8 to 12 reps, that you can do where you're struggling with the last. That's where you want to be, and wherever that is for that day, that's okay.
Mhm.
And so there's at the end of the day, the rate of which we will lose muscle mass will not be beaten, right? So no matter how much you strength train as you continue to age, that will outpace itself. So you're never going to be able to maintain and bench press, 300 pounds when you're 100 years old. That's just not going to happen. But can you really slow the decline of that loss of muscle mass and subsequently strength? Absolutely. But it's going to have to be something that you experience for yourself every day, and not to chase the number that you were doing in your 20s and 30s, because you won't be
Mm.
successful doing that.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that we really try to guide people to is, and that's why these assessments are important, is look at how they're trending. And by the way, maintaining is a win, right? Because in the absence of maintaining, you're decreasing. If you were
Mhm.
doing nothing, we are all losing muscle mass. Probably everybody who's listening to this podcast today is older than 30, let's say. We're all losing muscle mass every year. It's just a part of the aging process again. It's that sarcopenia condition.
Mhm.
And knowing that even just staying flat means that you're good, right?
Mm.
So that's what we really want to get people talking about. And one other thing, just to really clarify, there's different kinds of strength. And without nerding out on this stuff with your listeners, really there's what I'll call hypertrophy, which is that, or muscular endurance, which is more of that traditional, what we think of, you're lifting 8 to 12 reps, in a given set. And then there's power. And power is something that's often not really talked about and differentiated, but power is an important thing to maintain as you age. So focusing on our strength, or what's often referred to as hypertrophy, will prevent you from falling. But if you do fall, power will make it so you can catch yourself and not smash your face against the ground.
Mm,
And power is really tapping into, there's something called slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fibers. Power
mhm,
is all about your fast twitch and moving weight quickly. So, another way that when we think about progressive overload, we can think about bringing in things like power to mix things up. And
mm,
so, doing a push-up where you really push yourself off the ground fast, right? And
mhm,
go slow, slow, slow to the ground, and then push yourself off the ground. You're still doing the same movement as a regular push-up that you're used to doing, but you're changing how you're executing that movement. So you're
mhm,
focusing on using your muscles in a different way. And so we try to bring that into what we're doing with Vivo as well, so that we're really continuing to create that level of challenge. So again, that's where I talked about earlier, kind of we changed the theme of what we do every week, so that some weeks we really are challenging. We may be doing the exact same exercises, but the way that you're moving, the speed at which you're moving through those exercises is a big differentiator for how you're using your muscles.
mm. Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. That it's not all the same type of strength. There is You can do slow, controlled reps to build more muscle, but you also, from a performance perspective, you want to do some fast reps too. It will feel different. Like if you're doing, if you haven't done power training in a while, if you've been doing like slow, controlled squats, and then you go and you're like, okay, I want you to squat as hard as you can, like as quickly as you can. You're like, whoa, this feels weird, and I'm more sore the next day. And I think that having the foundation of being able to do those reps slow and controlled, so that when you do them quicker, you can do them properly. Because I think a lot of people, they'll like, oh, I get to move fast, fun, and then you just
Yeah,
completely
your
forget
floor
about your
falls.
technique.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. So, anyways, I'm
It,
glad you. I think that the initial point you made of like you can't focus on the numbers. It's about the relative challenge, about the day to day challenge, not like looking at the month performance, but looking at this is how I felt today, and this is how I pushed myself today. I think that's a really important concept to embrace, not just for the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s demographic, but like everybody need to be able to look at their fitness like that.
Yeah, just showing up often is a win, and it's important for us all, because no one ever is going to make us exercise. This is a
Hmm.
100% self-directed initiative for you, for me, for the rest of our lives. Right? A doctor can tell you all day long that you need to lose weight and you need to exercise or stop smoking or whatever the behavioral change is. But at the end of the day, you are the one who's going to make yourself do something.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that also we see a lot is just showing up sometimes is the win, and not worrying about, I did 20 push-ups last week and now I can only do
Hmm.
10 today. That's okay. And so I love the point that you just kind of reinforce, and I would just want to share with people that sometimes just showing up is the win, and
Yeah.
to not beat yourself up over it, but recognize that this is a long game. This is not something you're going to win in a
Yes.
week or a month or
Hmm.
6 months. This is something that you just want to have a part of your life, because the science is so clear. People that exercise live healthier, happier, longer lives, period. There
Hmm.
is no, doubt about those things, but how to build it into your lifestyle in a way that keeps you doing it consistently, that
Hmm.
is what the challenge really is.
Yeah. And I that's yeah. I mean, well said. So I want to ask you, like, what was your motivation for wanting to create this? You and I have had this conversation already, but I wanted to ask you again to better understand. Like, this is something that isn't just a business for you. This is something that allowed you to actually have a closer relationship with your dad.
Yeah, I love to talk about this because it is such a, I think it's something that pretty much everyone can relate to, because again,
Hmm.
we all age the same way. And really it was a couple of different things that happened all at the same time. One is I happened to see a speaker. It wasn't a TED talk, but it was something similar to a TED talk about the four cornerstones of healthy aging,
Mhm.
being exercise, nutrition, sleep, and meditation slash mental health. And he really dove into exercise in this conversation. And specifically, he introduced me to that word sarcopenia. I'd never heard that before. I didn't know how important strength training was as you age. This was really the first time that I heard that. And I remember talking to my parents at the time, who were in their 70s, about, have you ever heard this word sarcopenia before? Did you know you're supposed to be strength training? And it was no, 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 no. And even as I talked to other people who are in kind of my circle of friends, nobody really knew this. And so I just kind of filed that away as, isn't that interesting? Well, a number of years later, where my parents, again, they really started to experience this decline in their quality of life. And in particular, my dad developed some chronic issues where he was walking over like hunched over like a hunchback. My mom
Mm.
started having a series of falls. I started getting more involved in their care. And this is really where I started to see this disconnect between the healthcare system and what they were telling my parents and what I had just kind of heard a few, years back about some of these really important elements of aging that it just wasn't connecting.
Mhm.
And it really gave me this strong desire to want to intervene for my own parents' sake. And the more I started researching this, and I was very fortunate. I'm a graduate of Duke University, and I had maintained a relationship with being a commercial advisor for some professors who were building a separate business at Duke. But because of that relationship, I found myself actually interviewing a gentleman who worked for the Duke Center for Aging. He ran the Duke Center for Aging,
Mm.
and I started telling him about this idea around strength training for older adults, and his eyes lit up. And
Mm.
they had been doing a bunch of work and research at the Duke Center for Aging about specifically this, and they had some really compelling data and got exposed to that program and that data. And again, the science is so clear. There is no mystery around the benefits of strength training and exercise in general for older adults. But seeing what was possible
Mhm.
was so inspiring, and that really set me on this course. And then I will also let you know that my own fear of aging, I think, really was a
Mhm.
big motivator as I approached my 50s and now in my 50s. Um, and starting to experience the pains of aging, right? Things are just a
Yeah.
little bit harder and things hurt maybe a little bit more. And understanding that what I do now will impact what I can do 10 years from now and 20 years from now.
Mhm.
And look, barring, some tragic event, car accident, whatever, or some chronic condition, cancer, heart attack, etc., people's life expectancy is significantly growing.
Right.
And it's very reasonable that we're all going to live into our 80s, 90s, and beyond, especially with the way that science is progressing, and especially that next generation.
Mhm.
And um, it is incumbent upon us to really understand how to embrace those years, because there's two ways to experience those years, right? Like in
Mhm.
constant decline or in maintaining your quality of life and doing the things that you love.
Mhm.
And your physical wellness and capabilities and functional ability is really that floor that drives everything else. Because if you lose your mobility, your everything else that you want to do is going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
And so that became a huge motivator for me. I was watching it with my parents. I had a little bit of fear for myself,
Mhm.
and I really dove into the research around what strength training can do for you as you age. And then I also got fortunate. I got connected with a few very very smart people. A woman named Dr. Katie Starr at the Duke School of Medicine and the Division of Geriatrics. A gentleman named Chris Thompson, who is at the University of San Francisco, and another gentleman named Dr. Joe Nocera, who's at the Emory University School of Medicine. Randomly got connected with them,
Yeah.
conveyed some of the passion around what I was doing, and they were doing research in this field, and they were agreed to help me with this crazy idea. So
Yeah.
that's really the genesis, and watching with my parents. And then the flip side of that, which is so amazing, Dean, to watch, is because this is a virtual program, an online program. My dad lives in Philadelphia, my mom lives in South Florida. I get to do this with them.
Mhm.
So I participate in Vivo with my dad twice a week and with my mom. And so we're in this small group together, and I can see my dad working hard, and I can see the progression that he's experiencing. My dad is 81 years old, and he's capable of doing planks and push-ups on his toes and hands just like I do.
Hmm.
And he's not an exerciser. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of this is you can actually watch someone get stronger and progress and get more confident and get more capable. And we haven't even really talked about there's a huge mental aspect of benefit, mental benefit,
Hmm.
both in terms of, and there's a ton of research around depression, anxiety, mood disorders. Strength training is one of the most effective ways at counteracting those things, improving mood. Fear of falling tends
Hmm.
to correlate with actual falls. And when you get stronger, that fear of falling declines. People get more confident. And so there's wonderful benefits just beyond the physical aspects that we think about when we think about strength training. There's mental, people tend to sleep better
Hmm.
when they're strength training. There's a ton of really ancillary benefit that's associated. And it's been wonderful to watch that with my own parents.
Yeah. I mean, I think you said all of that really well. I actually, before I, got to this point with Manful Yoga, where, everything that I do now is pre-recorded videos, right? I've got a members area. I have an app where you can follow programs and workouts. Before then, I was doing a lot of a decent amount of one-on-one video training, and I actually, my dad was like one of my first clients. He's like, I want to do it. I'm like, okay. And so I got to, my dad's like 60, 63 now, I guess. So I guess we would have started when he was in his late 50s. But it was cool because my dad he's a doctor, so he was gone 6 a.m. until 7:30 p.m. like every day. And so I didn't see him that much. And when we do have conversations, we just didn't practice having conversations. So it's like kind of, there's like almost like this barrier to like having like an open conversation. It just feels kind of weird. So for me to be able to do like, training with him where I get to, just hang out with him for 30 minutes and do some yoga with him and be able to exercise with him was a really cool experience. I'm glad I'm glad you got to do that with your dad. And if you're listening and you're like, hey, I want to hang out with my dad, like, hey, do a workout with him.
And you know what? That's I'm really glad you told that story because it's so true that it's not just feels great to watch my dad improve his confidence and his strength and his function, et cetera. It's not that our relationship was bad beforehand, but it's
Hmm.
actually improved our relationship.
Yeah.
And I actually have a theory around this. So because exercise releases endorphins, you feel
Yeah.
good about yourself. When you do that as a small group, you tend to feel good about everybody who's in that group with you.
Hmm.
And so we're having this shared experience together where it's not, I still call my dad every week, oh, dad, what did you do this week? I don't know. What did you do? Like,
Yeah.
we still have that conversation. But when you have a shared experience with someone, especially one that releases endorphins and makes you feel good afterwards, it
Hmm.
tends to positively impact your perception of that individual.
Yeah.
And so not only is my dad physically getting healthier, our relationship has gotten stronger since we do Vivo twice a week together. It's
Hmm.
really, really cool. And whether you do Vivo or not, finding a way to engage with your aging parents in a way that's a shared experience, I would absolutely recommend. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Um, no, I can't. There's you can't say enough good things about that. So we talked about this. So for people who are listening to this right now, and you're like, I don't do strength training right now. I would like to do more strength training. We did prepare a special offer for you guys to try out Vivo. Um, do you remember? I think we said, I forgot what we said. Do you remember what we said? Okay, we don't remember what we said, but it involves some sort of deal. It could be like 50%
I
off
think
your first month, or like, was that
I
it?
think it's 50% off your first 2 months, maybe.
Okay, yeah, there you go. So 50% off your first 2 months to try out Vivo Fitness. So all you're gonna do is follow the link in the description of this podcast. Um, is there gonna be a promo code? We don't
There will we yeah, sorry.
we
Is this
don't know. So just
definitive?
follow this.
There's a landing page that we can leverage, and or a promo code. So
Okay,
we'll make
cool.
sure
So
that's
just
the best.
follow the link in the description and the instructions there, and you guys can try out Vivo for yourself. We actually do have at least one member from Manful Yoga who is who is currently using both Manful Yoga and Vivo and combining them effectively. My general advice with strength training is to just alternate days. So 3 days Manful Yoga, 3 days strength training. It makes it very manageable, makes it so like you're still spending less than an hour or less than that per day on your fitness. It makes it not overwhelming. So if you guys do want to try it out, link in the description. Follow that, follow the instructions, and get your first 2 months at 50% savings. So, Eric, thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and now I want to move on to part two. Do our rapid fire questions. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, cool. What do you think is the one habit, mindset, or belief that has helped you the most in terms of your overall happiness?
To absolutely appreciate everything that happens to me, both good and bad,
Mm,
because good and bad are always going to happen to you. But embracing what's happening is a really wonderful skill to develop. And it took me a long time to develop that skill, by the way.
mm-hmm,
Um, Mindfulness and meditation is a big part of learning how to do that. But taking in everything that you feel is has been a wonderful thing that's allowed me to know that sometimes good things happen, sometimes bad things happen, but the way that you take it in is important.
mm-hmm.
And that's my answer.
That's a good answer. What's one thing that you do for your health that you think is overlooked or undervalued by others?
I couldn't not answer strength training after this conversation, and that is absolutely the case, by the way. So my exercise has evolved since I've started Vivo, and
Mhm,
Vivo is the predominant. And we're really focused on building strength, but it's impossible not to get a cardiovascular workout when we're doing these workouts as well.
mhm.
And so
Do you
strength
find
training.
that do you find that the people in your life, when they think about exercise, do they think about strength training as the main thing, or do they think about jogging or, like, walking or, like, hike I don't know.
Yeah, it is absolutely cardiovascular health, and probably walking is the lowest,
Mhm,
common denominator form of that. And to this day, even though people know what I do, in my friend group or family, walking is absolutely what people talk about and do the most.
mhm.
And strength training, again, we talked about it. There's a little bit of an inhibitor in people adopting this into their life, but it has made such a huge difference in my life, and I've watched it make such a huge difference in the lives of my parents and our customers.
Yeah. Alright, what's the most important activity you regularly do for your stress management?
Oh
You can't
boy.
say exercise, you gotta do
I'm
something else.
can I say TikTok?
You can. That would be the worst answer, but, like, if I mean, hey, it's valid. If that's what you do
Actually,
for
yeah,
stress
no.
management, then that's
So
okay.
I continue to work on this, but it's absolutely meditation. And
Mhm.
so,
What does your
um,
meditation look like?
so it's usually involves the app Calm. I'm not an investor or anything, but
Mhm,
Calm is what has worked for me. And so I will spend. They have really nice, succinct 10-minute, audio on demand library.
mhm.
And I will wake up. I will take my dog for a walk. I will come back and I will do a 10-minute Calm meditation session.
Perfect.
And again, it is a work in progress to really adopt, but I think it's made a significant difference in my mental health.
Yeah. It's great that you have it at a specific time, built it into your schedule. Like, that's a huge part of what I talk about is, like, how to build habits, and you did
That's
it.
right.
Anyways, what is the most stressful part of your day-to-day life?
As an entrepreneur, it's pretty much all waking hours of work.
Mhm,
So trying to grow a business is unbelievably challenging. Trying to do it at this stage of my life when I'm in my 50s,
mhm.
all over again, starting from nothing, starting from scratch, this business, and trying to turn it into not just a lifestyle business, but truly a global company where we are a lifestyle brand. We are promoting healthy aging. This is a significant challenge. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and it's incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurship, and for your listeners who are entrepreneurs, they will appreciate this. It's very lonely, which I think a lot of people don't really understand.
Mm.
And B, the highs and lows that you experience are not even necessarily on a daily basis; it's on an hourly basis. And so it's the challenges of starting a business are voluminous, and it causes a lot of stress.
Yeah. And then, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing men and their well-being right now? And you can't say strength. You have to say something else.
Well, I will reflect back on that whole concept of shame because I do see this much more in men than in women,
Yeah.
where there's a much greater level of adoption and willingness to try and engage, even especially as a part of a group with traditionally with what we see in our customer base with women than with men. And I
Mm,
think part of that is this concept that we used to be so strong and now we're strong and we're embarrassed or we're shameful or we don't want to expose that. I think it's really important that as we focus on our wellness and our independence and our quality of life, it's shedding that, it's embracing that it's okay to need help. It's okay to get guidance. It's okay to expose that part of ourselves to other people and not worry about the judgment that we're also fearful of. And I see this a lot. And if it's not specific to Vivo, but I do think it's specific to exercise and other areas where we all need help as we get older. And embracing that and shedding that sense of shame and fear is an important growth area, I think, for all men as we age.
yeah. So it's shame that we're not measuring up to the standard of strength we believe we should be.
That's right.
And that's like, and I think like that's, I think that's something that translates into, and it's such a common, it's such a common thread of the answer that we received to that question. It's like shame that I'm not measuring up to this standard of strength, or it's shame that I'm not measuring up to this level of success, or shame that I am not like that compared to what I've been conditioned to think is the ideal man. That's not who I am. So
That's
I
right.
think that shame is huge, and I'm glad you brought it up. So cool. All right. Well, that concludes the interview, guys. I hope you really got a lot out of that. Eric, thank you for all the information on strength training, on how is that's impacted as we get older. Thanks for all the info on Vivo. I hope that at least a few hundred, a few thousand, or like a few guys like go over and actually get started, and keep me updated on how it's going. If you do sign up, like let me know. I'd love to hear how it's going for you guys. But this is a really educational episode. So Eric, thanks again for joining me.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Dean.
Cool. All right. I'll see you guys on the next episode. I hope this inspires you to be a better man. If you like that episode, check out this other one right here. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed, click this subscribe button over here, and you can listen to the full episodes on any major podcasting platform. Full details below in the description.